Coming up on DFE News, goodbye Colorado Springs, Space Command is making a big move. Also, dismantling the Department of Education, will it help or hurt? EmmaSara McMillion has real-life experience to back up her thoughts on that. And want to bring drugs into the U.S.? Better ask yourself, is it worth your life? We've got news for you, those stories and more right now on DFE News. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on DFE News. News done right. I'm Jeff Kirk. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment so everyone gets to see DFE News. So much is going on. Let's get right to it. In a callback to a move he made in his first term, President Trump announced Tuesday that U.S. Space Command would move from Colorado to Alabama. Trump originally signed the order to establish Space Command at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama back in 2018. But in 2023, President Biden instead decided to keep the command at its current location in Colorado Springs. Some see the change as a political move to shift federal resources and contracts from a blue state to a red state, but the president says it creates jobs and saves the country money.
This will result in more than 30,000 Alabama jobs and probably much more than that, and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and that's billions because it can't be millions, it's billions and billions of dollars. Most importantly, this decision will help America defend and dominate the high frontier, as they call it.
According to the Department of Defense, it could take 3 to 4 years to build facilities equal to the ones already in Colorado, by which time a new administration could reach a different conclusion. Well, law and order could be making a comeback in U.S. cities, but it's a different story in many other countries. People seem to be getting fed up. In multiple countries across the world, protests have been breaking out over the last few months as people voice their displeasure over mass immigration policies, which they say leads to higher crime rates. In England, cities have converted hotels into asylum housing for immigrants, which the locals say have turned into centers of sexual assault. This after allegations of law enforcement covering up assaults of English girls by immigrants going back years. Recently, English citizens have begun Operation Raise the Colors, putting up the English flag, also known as St. George's Cross, as well as the Union Jack, the flag of the United Kingdom, on light posts and street signs. British authorities have been trying to take them down as they say it creates a hostile environment for those from other countries. Some in England have even started painting potholes with the English flag, so the government will take quick action and fill them in. The U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon says the president told her she'll be successful if she works herself out of a job. But there are a lot of people angry that her mandate is to shut down the Department of Education. EmmaSara McMillion is not one of those angry people. She thinks it's a great idea and wants to go even further. She joins us now to explain. So EmmaSara, is putting Linda McMahon out of a job and shutting down the DOE the best course of action? Why or why not?
It is absolutely the best course of action. We have an agency that is about $90 billion in this Fed agency, and we have about $16,000 that is allotted per student. And what has that gained us? It hasn't gained us anything except results that show that our students are suffering. So I absolutely agree that we should do away with her position and the DOE.
Yeah, it seems like that funding is a big sticking point for a lot of people, and a lot of those on the left are really upset at this idea of taking the Department of Education and taking those roles and pushing it back down to the states. Here's Linda McMahon herself promoting the idea.
When President Trump appointed me Secretary of Education, he gave me a clear mission to end the federal government's heavy hand in education. Because education isn't decided in Washington, D.C., it is shaped in our schools, our neighborhoods, and by the people who know our children best. That's why we're launching the Returning Education to the States Tour. Over the next year, I'll be visiting schools across the country to highlight successful programs that put students first and to show what happens when local communities lead. We're bringing the conversation back to where it matters most, to our classrooms, to our communities, and to our local leaders. The Trump administration's goal is clear. Take the bureaucracy out of education, expand school choice, and make sure every student has access to a quality education. This is about restoring local control, expanding choices for families, and building a future where every student can succeed. Let's return education to our states and give America's students a future they deserve.
So, EmmaSara, what is your take on this idea of empowering the individual states?
I believe absolutely that the individual states should be empowered. The Constitution doesn't make for a position for the federal government to be over the education system. And so I really believe that states know what their students need. Why? Because each individual area, each individual state has a different area that they need. Some are dealing more with poverty than other areas. And so I think that it should be absolutely individualized, that the states have the power over education. Not only does it help with the funding situation, but also helps with the fact that these students, they need to have opportunities to do charter schools, or maybe some parents need private schools, but there is more of an opportunity for a parent to have a voice at a state level than trying to reach all the way past the red tape through the bureaucracy to try to reach the people who are so far and removed from what our children really need. I think that the state level is really the optimum decision we should be having for our nation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of discussion about school choice as well. So for those who are unfamiliar, could you talk about what school choice looks like and why is it so important?
I believe that school choice is important because I believe that no matter what the socioeconomic state is of a family, they should have equal access to quality education. And as it stands right now, we have public funding that is going to public schools. It's being funneled into the school system that I've already explained earlier, that our math right now is at the lowest rate for 8th graders that it's been in the last 2 decades. It's at the lowest rate. So we used to call it the 3 R's once upon a time. Reading, writing, arithmetic have gone down nationally. Okay. And as far as our nation, we're supposed to be a nation that is prosperous, yet our students are showing that we are on a decline. So we're on a decline morally. And how this happens is that when we have, the school system in the government level, then we have, which we're going to talk about probably a little bit later, a left agenda there. But as far as, what is school choice looks like, it looks like a parent having a choice, no matter what their socioeconomic background is, to give their child the proper education that they choose for their child at the learning ability level and at the, faith level that they're at.
So a lot of those who oppose school choice say, well, it'll just cause the schools that serve those lower income families, it'll just cause them to become even worse. How do you respond to that kind of a statement?
I live near Birmingham, and it is atrocious. When you look at the testing levels of the people who are in the inner cities, there's nothing that corroborates that statement that they're going to suffer more. They're already suffering because they have a system that is not producing the results that we're looking for, because they're not getting that money is going $16,000 per student. But I would say, is it really going towards a student, or where is it really going? Because I don't really see that it's benefiting them in getting the quality education they need. The teachers right now, in my feed every single day, the teachers are underpaid. So, all these billions of dollars are going into the system, but the teachers are very, they're paid very lowly. And so if they're getting a low pay, we're not getting quality teachers in. And I'm seeing so many teachers who are being arrested for abuse, whether it is being physically violent with them or sexually violent with them. We already have the system. Who are they going after? They're going after the lower income school districts. So these kids are not getting properly educated, and now they're being dealing with predators even within the school system. And so I don't think they're going to fare less because we're going to be taking away this funding.
So when a lot of parents talk about homeschooling, they talk about how it's just not for them. They don't feel that they're adequate. What are some of the excuses that you've heard as to why parents don't homeschool their kids, and how do you counter those objections?
Well, the number one thing I would say is that parents don't feel like they are adequate to homeschool their kids. They say, I don't have. And to be honest with you, yes, it's education. But for a mother, I would say the number one thing I hear is, I don't have the patience to homeschool. That's probably honestly the first thing that I hear as far as an objection goes. But I always tell them, if EmmaSara can homeschool, anybody can homeschool successfully. Why? First of all, my mom was only 14 when she had me. I was born in the ghetto of Los Angeles. I come from a family background of abject poverty. And so it wasn't like I was this, this woman who even felt capable. I just knew that I didn't want my kids to go to public school because I did not want them to get up. All these years ago, I was already saying it is a dangerous place. Predators are there. Kids are predators. Coaches are predators. So I homeschooled not for educational purposes. I homeschooled strictly for safety purposes. And this is honestly how I did it. I said, if I can teach them reading, writing, and math, then, and everything else is going to be frosting. So I put the bar so low for myself that if they that I knew that I could at least do that, right, to the extent that they needed it. So anyway, what I would say is this, is that I used to say I'm the most impatient person in the world. As far as ADHD goes, I'm like red on the level. So I'm highly distracted. My report cards used to say, highly distracted, but pleasure to have in class. So like my mind can be all over the place. You might say, well, what about kids? I have kids who are on the spectrum. I have a daughter who is on the spectrum as well. And, my kids have dealt with different types of challenges. Some people have said financial challenges, but I've already explained to you guys, we only made $26,000 for a family of 10 in 2018. And we were able to overcome, those obstacles. And in that time, we homeschooled with, just the library. We homeschooled with Khan Academy, all kinds of free resources. And then also, I don't have enough patience. Back to that again. I will tell you this, the school system has done a very good job at making you feel like your children are a burden. It is by design. I have a book, Ferocious, that is out there that talks about the enemy's plan to make them to do the opposite of what God wants, obviously, but to make children who are supposed to be a blessing feel like a curse. And so now they've been thrown into a public school system. And now you're, been in this for generations, decades of parents or kids becoming parents and parents, going through the cycle where now you guys are, I would say us as a nation has been so attuned to being put into a public school system that kids are not being taught character anymore. They're not being taught values, morality, and all these different things. It's a recipe for disaster. And so when they come home, kids are not taught character. So they are a handful. They feel like a burden because, like I said, it's by design. So I always say this is the number one thing is if you want to bring your kids home, first of all, it's going to be a transition, truly, but go with character first. As long as they're doing math and they're doing reading and you do nothing else and you just work on following the rules, being attentive, having fun in the process, developing character, that will go eons beyond forcing a kid to be in the books that he doesn't want to be in, eons besides, putting a kid in front of transgender, transsexual curriculum or whatever it is. Like, why would you not want to give up a little of your time and be maybe a little bit of uncomfortable for a minute? But truly, our kids are being made to feel uncomfortable every day in the public school system.
They have that good, solid foundation on those values that you want and not the values that the school approves for your child. So let's go back to a little bit of the federal funding that we talked about earlier. Some individuals say, well, if I homeschool, then I deserve that federal funding that follows the child. And then that's money for me to use for education or to use for something else. Should parents of homeschoolers take funding from the federal government? Some would see that as if the government is funding you, you belong to the federal government or you're tethered to the federal government for better or for worse.
Well, to that, I would say that this is where we, look to the Trump administration and we appeal to him. Like I said, I really believe that we should have a parent-told Bill of Rights when it comes to the area of education. And so I think that we should have it written into the code that parents should not be forced to give our children curriculum that goes against morality, that goes against our faith. And we should have that written into the code. And so I see why currently parents don't want the money. I don't want my kids learning what they're learning in public school either. But if we can somehow detach what they're learning and take that off of the requirement then why wouldn't we want that money to go into educating your child? Why wouldn't you want that money to give your child music lessons, or to give them, went back in the day they had pottery, they had mechanics? Why wouldn't you want to put that money into skills or other things? If we could, of course, slice off that it's ridiculous, to the curriculum right now that has been given is absolutely ridiculous. So if we could just slice that off, if we can throw away the DOE and move forward, I think then we can have a place to talk where parents wouldn't feel scared anymore.
So also with regard to that federal funding, there are those, especially parents of children who have special needs, whether that's they are deaf or have some type of a learning disability, that they get the same amount of federal funding as a child who is, as they say, neurotypical. So if a child goes to a different school or homeschools, and then there is less of that, they don't cost as much to educate on a yearly basis. Now the remainder of that money is no longer available to further help out a child who is in further need. How would you respond to that idea?
So this is where we have to understand that we are under a current construct that has been going on for decades. This is a time where we rewrite history. This is a time when we rewrite budgets. And so this is us going to the drawing board and saying, let's just erase everything and let's start over again. And let's look at the funding and let's deal with the fact that there are many special needs children. And today, also in my book, I write about it. I mean, I don't know what the current numbers are, but last I was looking, it's about 1 in 27 children have autism or been diagnosed on the spectrum. So I would say that, special needs children are still going to be protected by different organizations. Like the IDA is an organization that works to protect children with disabilities. And so there's still going to be appropriations that will be given to children who have special needs. But like I said, I think it's about going back to the drawing board, starting over again, making sure that there is a proper appropriation that puts an extra amount or an extra allotment for kids. We don't have to be so slice and dice with only 16 per kid if we have special programs that will be able to facilitate. I mean, you think about it, we have, like I said, the $90 billion agency, but how much of that is going to the proper areas? And so part of doing this would also, if we put the funding into the states, if we put in, or the responsibility into the states, what will happen is that there will be more ability for, the funds to actually get where they're supposed to, because there will be accountability. And right now, I feel like there's just a lack of accountability in the entire system.
So, EmmaSara, if you were to get a call from Linda McMahon or President Trump and they say, come on out to DC, I want to sit down with you and I want you to advise me on how we should be doing things, what's your advice for them?
I would have some smart advice, and I would start with the S, which is student funding. And I would say, let the funding follow the student. That means let the money be dictated towards the individual student rather than the bureaucracy, rather than this curriculum that is teaching them how to be immoral. Let the funding actually follow the student so they can get the proper education they need in reading, writing, and arithmetic, and critical thinking. And I would also say minimize the DOE in Washington. Of course, I would say eradicate it completely. But if we had to do something, more systematic, I would say at least shrink the DOE and let them be more focused on civic responsibility and maybe, data and research as opposed to creating curriculum. And then also A would be apprenticeships. And I would say if we can get more help in the area of trade schools and giving our students a proper career training that they need, I would ask for apprenticeships. And then R is for respect. I would ask that the government would respect homeschool freedom. And I know that President Trump does, and I'm so grateful for that. But specifically, even lesson or no federal testing would be great, no strings attached, and that a child should be able to be educated the way their family sees fit. And of course, we want those good families to educate their children in a godly way or in a way that is productive for society. And then T would be transparency. We need a Parents' Bill of Rights that is going to protect parents from, this ideology that is being stuffed down their children's throat without parents knowing. So I would ask for a parent's bill of rights that is going to say, if my child is going to be taught something in a private school, in a charter school even, or wherever they're being taught away from home, that a parent would have the right to see what their children, what they're learning, and then not be given, medical advice from school districts without the parents' consent.
Yeah, that's such a big thing nowadays. Well, you mentioned President Trump being very supportive of the homeschooling agenda in particular, but that wasn't always the case. What was it like for you during the Biden administration when they started investigating parents, school board, parents who would speak up, and investigating them for domestic terrorism?
Well, first of all, it was scary. I think it was scary for all homeschoolers, but it didn't impact me and my family because we have been very guarded. And of course, we're always ahead of the game when it comes to, navigating the system. But for, many other parents, they didn't fare as well. And some of them did get put on the line, and they did get put on the chopping block. And so I'm a part of organizations like Mom Army and Moms for Liberty, so that I can get behind those parents who are in the struggle or who have been put on the chopping block, because I do believe that they should be protected. And I believe that their voices should be heard. And so it was a scary time, but honestly, I'm just concerned now about what happens after Trump. I believe that as families, we have to be very vocal in this time while we have the Trump administration to do our part to retain our freedoms and also to build upon them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you yourself are a homeschool mom. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your homeschool successes with your own children?
Yes, I am a homeschool mom, and I'm always telling moms, if EmmaSara could homeschool successfully, anyone can. And I have 8 kids from the ages of 7 to 26 years old, and I have record-breaking kids. And I always say it's not because of, my ability, but it's because I've been able to uniquely educate my children. Each one of our children has a gift from God. Doesn't matter what faith you are, each child has a gift. And I've just educated them in the way of their gifting. Not so much, what they like to do specifically. Some kids, like to do silly things, but in the area of their gifting. And what has happened is now, because of that, I have one child who just broke a record for Calhoun College at the age of 12. He was admitted into college here, and he's been featured on local news and national news. I have a son at the age of 19. He was one of the youngest technicians working on rockets for Jeff Bezos in West Texas. I also have a child who was at the age of 4, was one of the youngest author of the century. And then I have one son who just started a business, and at the age of 19, he's been in college for 2 years. And his first couple months, he did a $60K turnover. And so that's just some of them. I have a lot of kids who've done a lot. All of them have done spectacular things, down to my 7-year-old who also helped co-author a book. Wow,
that's absolutely incredible. I'm definitely feeling like I'm way behind the curve in that respect. So aside
I do want to say this is not braggadocious. It really, if you follow our story, if I can do it, anybody can. And somebody might say it must be nice. It must be nice to have money. It must be nice to have resources. But with, in 30 seconds, I would say this. Our family lived in the desert in a 235 square foot RV, sometimes with no running water, with no electricity. We lost everything overnight. We lost our income. My husband lost his health. And we were literally put in a desert experience with tarantulas, rattlesnakes, and scorpions. And it was a terrible time. And I'll tell you this, we only made $26,000 in 2018 for a family of 10. And in spite of all that stuff, God showed up for us, and we continued to educate the way we felt God was calling each one of our children individually, to the point of my 7-year-old started organic chemistry when he was only 7. I did not pay anything for this. I got him books from the library. I got him books from Amazon. And now he's the one that just got into college at 12 years old. And so I would say, where there's a will, there's a way. And I don't know half the things that my kids know. And the things that are deemed important in public school, I could care less about.
Yeah, for sure. There's such a huge discrepancy between what's really important and a lot of the so-called education that kids get nowadays. Well, EmmaSara, we've had your contact information on the screen so people know how to reach out and get in touch with you if they have any questions. EmmaSara McMillion, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
A word of warning to anyone trying to bring drugs into the United States: it could cost you your life. President Trump released a video Tuesday on Truth Social showing a U.S. military strike on a Tren de Aragua drug boat in Caribbean waters. The president said in his post that, quote, TDA is a designated foreign terrorist organization operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror across the United States and Western Hemisphere. He went on to say that the strike happened in international waters and the terrorists were transporting illegal narcotics headed to the U.S. The president's post also mentioned that 11 terrorists were killed in the strike and that no U.S. forces were harmed. He put everyone thinking about bringing drugs into the U.S. on notice that they should beware, and ended with his usual closing statement of, "Thank you for your attention to this matter." Employees of the Centers for Disease Control participated in a large-scale walkout last week in response to moves by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Kennedy had fired CDC Director Susan Monares Wednesday over her refusal to align with Kennedy's removal of the COVID mRNA vaccine from the childhood vaccine schedule and her overall resistance to the MAHA agenda. As a result, other key members of the CDC also resigned, including one Dimitra Daskalakis, Director of Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, whom President Biden had appointed as his monkeypox czar. Other employees of the CDC also walked off the job, with numbers estimated to be in the dozens to the hundreds. We'll leave you with a scary story that fortunately has a happy ending. A hero comes to the rescue of a child in danger along monorail tracks in Pennsylvania. It's every parent's nightmare for a child to disappear at an amusement park, and that's what happened Sunday when a young boy went into a secured area of the monorail at Hershey Park, then showed up on top of the tracks high above an anxious crowd. A man climbed up on the tracks as the onlookers pointed the boy towards safety. The hero grabbed the boy and brought him down as the crowd breathed a sigh of relief and cheered. It goes to prove the old saying that not all heroes wear capes. I'm glad men like that still walk among us. And parents, what a frightening reminder. Please keep your children close at all times, and especially at amusement parks. Well, that's it for now. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, comment, and engage with us so that YouTube and all the socials push it out to more viewers. If you'd like to become a DFE News sponsor, you can click on the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. Thanks for watching DFE News. News done right. See you next time.